Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the true self of God?
I do.
Your name, please?
Lawrence Regan.
And what is your occupation?
I'm unemployed.
How long have you known Karen Andre?
About 5 months.
Where did you meet her?
In Faulkner's office. I went there to do some business. I gave up the business because I met a secretary.
How did you happen to become friendly with Miss Andre?
Well, that first meeting wasn't exactly friendly. She wouldn't let me in to see Faulkner. She said I had enough money to buy orchids by the pound and I had no business with their boss. I said I'd think it over and I left. Well, I thought it over. But I didn't think about the business. Thought about her. Next day, I ordered her a pound of orchids. You ever see how many that makes? That's how it started.
Now, were you aware of Karen Andre's and Mr. Faulkner's relations with each other?
I knew of it before I even met her. What of it? I knew it was hopeless. I couldn't help it.
Did you ever expect Miss Andre to share your feeling?
No.
And you never attempted to force it upon her?
You gotta know all that?
I'm afraid we do.
Yeah, I kissed her once by force. It was the night of Faulkner's wedding. She was alone and very unhappy, and I was crazy about it. I didn't want her to know. She said it was hopeless. We never mentioned it since.
Now, when did Miss Andre first tell you of Faulkner's planned escape?
It was about 2 weeks before we pulled it out.
Was Lefty O'Toole one of your men?
No.
Were you connected with his murderers in any way?
No.
So you had no definite knowledge of his planned murder?
No, I just thought I had a way of guessing these things.
What happened on the night of January 16th?
Well, it all worked out as Miss Andreas told you. Only she knows half the story, and I know the rest.
What happened after you left the penthouse that night?
Well, I left 10 minutes after Faulkner did. He had taken my car. I had one of my men drop another car for me off at the door. I stepped on it, full speed.
Where did you go?
Meadow Lane, 10 miles out in Kings County. I had left my plane there earlier in the evening, and Faulkner was to get there first and wait for me.
What time did you get there?
It was about midnight. It was a bright moon. I could see tracks on the ground where Faulkner's car had passed. He was, I turned down the left lane, and I thought I'd lost my mind. The plane was gone.
What did you do?
Well, I searched that lane for 2 hours. I found the car where Faulkner and I had agreed to hide it. The lights were off, the key was in the switch. I looked on the ground where the plane had taken off, but Faulkner couldn't have flown that plane by himself.
Now, did you search for any clues to this mystery?
I searched like a bloodhound.
Did you find anything?
I did. One thing. A car.
What kind of car?
Well, it was hidden deep inside some bushes on the other side of the lane. It was a big black sedan.
And then what did you do?
Well, I wanted to find out who the owner was, so I broke out the back window. Climbed in, I settled down to wait.
How long did you have to wait?
The rest of that night.
And then?
Oh, and then the owner came back. I watched him as he approached. He looked a little odd. He had no hat. His clothes were wrinkled and grease-spotted.
Then what did you do?
Well, I pretended to be asleep. I watched him as he approached. Then he opens up the door, and he sees me. He gave a start and a yell as if he'd been struck in the heart. His nerves must have been jittery.
And then what did you do?
Well, I stretched, rubbed my eyes, and I said, it's you. Fancy such a meeting. I don't think he liked it much. He asked me who I was and what I was doing. I said, the name's Guts Regan. You may have heard of it. I was in a little trouble, and finding this car here was quite a convenience. He says, well, I'm sorry. I'm in a hurry. You're going to have to get out.
Did you get out?
No. I asked him what the hurry was. He said, it's none of your business. I said, well, you see, it's not for me. It just so happens that a friend of mine is a columnist. He'd be interested to know what a man of your prominence is doing wandering around in the wilderness at milkman time. I'm sure he'd like to know the whole story.
What did the man say?
He said nothing. He looked at me, I looked at him, he looked at me. He took out a checkbook. He said, would $10,000 be a suitable amount to keep your mouth shut? I said, it'll do. Lawrence Regan's the name. He wrote out the check. Here it is.
I offer this check in evidence.
Oh, what's all this nonsense? Who was the man?
Who was the man, Mr. Regan?
Well, let the clerk read it to you.
Kindly read the check.
Certainly. January 17th, paid to the order of Lawrence Regan the sum of $10,000. Signed, John Graham Whitfield.
That's an outrage.
I demand to see that check.
If there are any more interruptions of this kind, I should demand the courtroom cleared.
I offer this check in evidence.
Objection!
Objection overruled, accepted in evidence.
Now, what did you do after you received the check, Mr. Regan?
Well, I thanked him. I put the check in my pocket. And I drew my gun and I stuck it to his ribs. And I says, now you lousy bastard, what'd you do with Faulkner? He opened up his mouth like a fish choking. He couldn't make a sound.
Your Honor, is this man to be allowed to make such statements in public, in my presence?
The witness is allowed to testify. Should he perjure himself with any statements, he will be punished. Proceed, Stevens.
What was the man's answer, Mr. Regan?
First he muttered, I don't know what you're talking about. I said, I cut it out. I go, I'm in no hurry. Well, I'm in a hurry, but I wasn't that much of a hurry.
Did you get any information out of him?
Not a word. I didn't want to kill him. He says, if you expose me, you'll expose the fake suicide and Faulkner will be found. I said, is he alive? He said, go ask him. I talked and I threatened. It was no use. I let him go. I figured I could always get him.
Now, then did you search for Faulkner?
I didn't lose a second. I rushed home, changed my clothes, I grabbed a sandwich in an airplane. I flew down to Buenos Aires. I searched in advertising papers. Nobody called the banks for Ragnar Heaton's millions.
Did you attempt to communicate about this with Miss Andre?
No, we'd agreed not to communicate for a month. And then she was arrested for Faulkner's murder. I laughed when I read that. And I didn't want to say anything to betray him in case he was still alive, so I waited.
What were you waiting for?
February the 16th at the Hotel Continental in Buenos Aires. I set my teeth in of every minute, of every hour, of every day. He didn't come.
And then?
Then I knew he was dead. So I came back to New York and I started to search for my plane. We found it yesterday.
Where did you find it?
In a deserted valley in New Jersey, about 100 miles from Meadow Lane. It had been landed and fires set to it.
Was the plane empty?
No. I found the body of a man in it.
Could you identify the body?
No, no one could. Well, the height was the same. It was Faulkner. I examined the body, or what was left of the body, found 2 bullet holes, one in the hand and one in the rib above the heart. He must have been disarmed first, shot through the hand, then murdered, defenseless, straight through the heart.
That's all, Mr. Regan. Thank you.